Welcome to Authentic Living with Roxanne, a place where we have conscious conversations about things that really matter in our lives. And now here's your host, Roxanne Derhodge.
Hi everyone, it's Roxanne Derhodge of Authentic Living with Roxanne. Thanks for tuning in again this week. This week I have a colleague with me. Hi Leslie, how are you today?
I'm great, thanks Roxanne. How are you?
Good, good. Leslie and I recently had the privilege of speaking actually locally at an event called Disrupt Niagara, at which point I was privileged to listen to her on stage and was impressed and wanted her to come out and chat with us a little bit. So her business is called Positive Forward Motion Inc. Leslie is a leadership development consultant, a coach and a trainer, and she's revered as an emotional intelligence specialist, something that I think most organizations need more of. And she brings a warm, dynamic, and impactful approach to her coaching, facilitation, and speaking events. She's a former higher education administrator and leader of people and departments. She works with individuals and organizations to increase their leadership capacity in her niche. That's her niche, sorry. Building emotionally intelligent, high-performing, skilled professionals, leaders, and organizations is her mission. Fostering awareness of self and others, optimizing individual and collective emotional intelligence, and increasing adaptability and tolerance in times of change and stress is her deliverable. So thank you, thank you. So Leslie, let's talk a little bit about, and I know from spending time, and we just recently also spent a couple of hours driving back together from the Canadian Professional Association of Professional Speakers in London. So we had a couple of hours together. So tell me about your path. You've had quite a unique path, and I know you've been in corporate and things like that. What kind of made you want to get into working with leadership?
Well, that's a great question, and thank you for that lovely introduction. I really appreciate that. So my path is much like most of my life. It has not been a seamless, I'm going to decide what I'm going to do and go forward with it. It's really been sort of an evolution of self-discovery and career discovery. So way back in my early days, I started at my undergraduate degree is in international development and history. And so I started at in the college sector in post-secondary education in the international department, working with domestic students going overseas. And so my role was managing this program to get them ready to be overseas and be successful, to be personally and professionally successful. So they really had to feel empowered to be the leader of their own life because they wouldn't have that, support with them. So throughout that journey in that area, I developed a leadership development program. Then I went on to, do my master's of organizational leadership and organizational development. And that kind of really blew my world right up. And so from there, I moved into developing more leadership programming within the college sector, as well as engagement programming and really how do we engage and maximize the potential of our own life. Through that, somebody who was one of my mentors in the executive team saw something about coaching, and she said, "That's what you need to do, Leslie. That is exactly you." So I was like, let me look into that. So lo and behold, I fell in love with that. Got my coaching designation, got my ACC designation within the ICF, the International Coaching Federation. And from there, really, it just sort of started blooming into working one-on-one with folks, and then going into organizations and teams. People would just ask me. At this point, I was also working full-time in a really high-paced corporate role that I loved. So I was trying to fit it all in. And then over the last while, I made the big step and went out as an entrepreneur. And now that's what I do. I work with individuals, teams, organizations to increase their positive energy, positive emotional intelligence, and really just improve quality of life and workplaces. through addressing organizational culture.
So let's talk about, I think all of us, first of all, including me, um, energy is a commodity, right? Like, I mean,
Absolutely.
it's something that's, some days you get up and you're like, whoa, I'm on top of the world. And other days you kind of weave and wane. Would you?
Absolutely.
So when you go into organizations and what capacity might they have you in to kind of look at things like emotional intelligence? I want you to define emotional intelligence for some people that maybe don't know what it is and
Absolutely.
how that impacts energy.
Yeah. Oh, great question. So emotional intelligence, sort of in a high level, in a nutshell, is our ability to self-regulate and self-manage our own emotions, as well as in a very healthy way, interact with others and their emotions, notice them, empathy, healthy assertiveness, our own self-regard. The key to understanding how emotional intelligence can work for us or against us is we're all emotionally intelligent, or we believe ourselves to be, but it's how are we when there's stress or conflict or something triggering us. At that point, then how are we tapping into our emotional intelligence, right? And that's really around where folks would either bring me into their world to do one-on-one coaching, to talk about emotional intelligence, or bring into the organizations. So I have a proprietary program that's positive forward motion in the FAST lane. And FAST stands for frustrations, assumptions, stresses, and triggers. And I don't know about you, Roxanne, but I know I have a few of those on some days. So, and when we're in a leadership position, and even if we're just the leaders of our own lives, it's how are we thriving and staying really emotionally intelligent and positive energy when we're being triggered. Now, that doesn't mean, to your point, that we don't wake up some days, even me, who people are like, do you always have so much energy? No. Yes and no, right? It's a choice, and I'll get to that after. But some days we wake up and we really need to just kind of what I call turtle. We need to just, be by ourselves or stay quiet and protect our own energy. And sometimes we're just grumpy. And that's okay, right? The first key to really being emotionally intelligent is honoring and accepting our emotions, because once we honor and accept them, then we can deal with them. If we're pretending we don't have them, or if we're pushing them down, it's what I call emotional whack-a-mole. Like, we push down an emotion and it pops up over here as a fight with our spouse or our family or a friend, or we push something down over here and we end up snapping at somebody in the grocery store or crying at a commercial, right? Our emotions need to be honored, and that's in life and that's in the workplace. So really having a way to understand your triggers, and that's what the positive forward motion programming does. It's in a very safe way and confidential. Obviously, all coaching is confidential. And then when I work with organizations, this kind of information, even if we're doing a workshop, this stays confidential to the person. It's a little bit of that inner work, but really starting to understand what is triggering us, what's making us hot under the collar. And then from there, there's an index of 7 sort of buckets of emotions or categories of where our emotions are going to fall. So on this energy leadership index, then that's when I said you can start making a choice. Then you can say, okay, am I feeling level 1? Am I feeling level 2? Am I level 5 today? Right? Where am I, or where am I right now? And what am I going to do about it? Right? So it's really, once you can understand that index and your emotional intelligence, then you get to make the decisions in a very conscious way of what you're going to do with it. Right? And this, from a leadership position, this is critical, right? Because there's always eyes on you. I always say you're like the flight attendants of an organization, right? Or of your team. They're looking at you, right? So if you panic, if there's a big change coming and you panic, they're going to panic. But if you're able to manage your own emotions and then help regulate the emotions of the folks that are either on your team, then it's win-win, right? You're already on your way to a more positive culture.
Because absolutely, as being around a lot of leaders, or also being a leader myself,
Absolutely,
it was such, you were constantly, quote unquote, the pivot point in on the team, because if I acted badly,
yep,
there was a peripheral effect of all the team members. But if I was able to kind of help them understand that, hey, this is a tough time, and allow them in to say, I'm going to do the best I can with what's going on. And what do you need from me? Sometimes I find that a lot of leaders are disconnected from that space, because oftentimes the higher up you get up in the hierarchy, the perception is that person has a bit less responsibility to connect. Would you agree with that statement?
So did you say the perception is that they have?
Yeah, it's almost like if I'm the CEO versus if I'm the frontline manager to some degree. I often say that, we all still want to relate to the CEO, the senior team, and obviously the frontline and the middle managers. But sometimes the perception is that they're allowed to be a little bit less connected.
Oh, that's interesting. Some of the best higher level leaders, CEOs, C-suites, executives, are really the ones that really understand exactly what you were just describing, that really empathetic connection to people. Even just remembering names in the hall. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean they need to sort of jump into their life and know, their husband or wife or boyfriend, girlfriend, family's names. But really just, hey, Lesley, hey, Roxanne, good to see you. How's it going in that department? Some of the best leaders that I've had the honor to work with and for, as well as ones that have been narrated to me, are really those ones, regardless of what level you're at, they're really still maintaining that interpersonal connection. And interpersonal is one of the sub-competencies within emotional intelligence that makes them very, very successful. And if you can hone that interpersonal, you actually have you have a better chance of promotion, retention, and engagement. Just one more thing that you mentioned there, when you were describing that situation, you were describing a very empathetic leader, which is another really key thing. Mm-hmm. If we want our folks to work hard as a leader, they need to want to do it for the leader. Mm-hmm. Right. And so if you are having those really understanding and empathetic conversations with them and that relationship building with them, then you are, again, through that, like another sub-competency is empathy of emotional intelligence, then you're really increasing your emotional intelligence. Mm-hmm. Interestingly enough, though, one of the first emotional intelligent competencies to go when we're frustrated or we're in the fast lane is empathy. That's when we really start. Then it becomes, we put up our blinders, and then it's all about, oh, this person did this, or I'm feeling this. We really start to close our worldview. And from a leadership perspective, we do it too, right? That's life. We're humans. But at that point, that's when you need to start tapping in and say, okay, from a consciousness level, am I being empathetic in this situation? Right.
So I'm going to tell you, I've had a bit of both experiences working with companies. Okay. As an executive. There were either really, really good, empathetic, connected leaders, or the ones that when they got under pressure, what happened, unfortunately, they were reactive. So do you think there's more of a tempo now in organizations to accept emotional intelligence as a basic metric for productivity?
Oh, absolutely. That's such a great point. So I would say even over the last year or so, a lot of organizations that have brought me in, either to do one-on-one coaching, and that's a positive thing. Folks, they sometimes worry that if they're tapped for leadership or executive coaching, that they've done something wrong. It's an honor, right? Like they're usually saying there's a great potential here and we want to, foster that. So don't think if you get tapped for coaching that's necessarily a bad thing. But what a lot of folks do, if I'm working with teams, it could be individuals, or if I'm doing workshops with teams, they're actually starting to build the goals and outcomes that we set in our workshops right into whatever their version of their performance management is. So that no longer are we what I like to call sidelining the fluff. It's bringing the fluff or the soft skills to the forefront, and they're really building those in, because what can happen is if we have those, for lack of a better word, I'll say bad behaviors or catabolic energy. So catabolic behaviors, so that negative, a little bit lower level not great energy. If we let that run free in the workplace without addressing it and put coaching or performance measures around it, then that starts to spread in the workplace, and then that becomes really contagious, right? And from there, so that, as you know, that was our what I did my Disrupt HR talk on. So you know a little bit about this from that conversation, but we really want to identify it in a positive forward motion, or a positive constructive way. Start building that into our folks' development plans and our own development plans, right? To understand where we're falling and what we can do about it.
So that's amazing. So let's talk a little bit. Would you mind talking about the different levels of energy? Because
I would love to.
Because I think that's the part that I find fascinating. And, you know, I think sometimes people are unaware that they're unaware, right?
Sorry, go ahead.
Sometimes, you know, and then you think, oh, I'm doing this pretty good. And then you realize, oh, actually, I didn't realize I was doing this or whatever. So I'd love to hear the different levels.
Okay.
And I'm sure, I'm going to assume people listening also would like to know about those different levels and kind of where we, you know, I'm going to be thinking, where do I sit?
Yeah, well, that will make my day. If you start thinking in levels, one thing before I get started on the levels that you just said about we don't always know what we don't know. Harvard University did a study, and they found that 47% of our time is lost to unconscious thought. 47%, which means 47% of the time, we don't even know what kinds of energy or signs or signals we're putting it out into the world, right? And so a lot of the training that I do really sort of has a multi-pronged approach. One is so that we understand our emotional intelligence and what we're sending, the energy we're sending out into the world as one. Two, we want to claw back a bit of that 47% of the time, be more mindful, that mindful leadership, being a mindful leader of your own life, being mindful in your organizations, so that we're clawing back and owning more of that 47%, right? We want more than half of a day in our own lives. And then the third part is okay, so what can we do now that we know better? Is it Maya Angelou? Now that we know better, do better. Once you know better, do better. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's really interesting. Like when I think 47% of the time, what did I do with that day? Okay, so now we'll talk about the levels. So I am a master practitioner of the Energy Leadership Index. So what this index is an index of 7 levels, and it starts the bottom 2 are catabolic energy, which is a heavier, more judgmental, can be angry, can be powerlessness. And then the higher levels 3 to 7 are what's referred to as anabolic energy. And that's much more productive, proactive, innovative, compassionate, empathetic, all of that great stuff. The terminology is very intentionally not negative energy and positive energy, because each of the levels has advantages and disadvantages. And sometimes we need, I'll explain it, but sometimes we need a little bit of that level 2 fire in our belly to move us up, right? So, and I'll explain what that means a little bit, but it's just sort of making the point that that all the levels serve a time and a place and a space, right? The key is, how long are you staying at the lower level? And, you know, are you making sure not to sort of unpack? So in a nutshell, in a high level, and again, anyone can follow up with me to find out more of this and do an assessment, because it comes with it, and then you can see where your inner energy is. The first level is sort of that victim status, sort of being at the victim of things happening to us. We tend to feel powerless, very lethargic. Like you can even feel something happens and you feel very like, I don't have the energy for this. I can't do this. You know, I always try and I never get ahead, right? So then you go to level 2. Level 2 is categorized around conflict, right? So it's I'm going to win and you are going to lose, right? And so it's resistance, it's forcefulness. It can be, all of that can be in your head. It doesn't necessarily mean you're an outwardly angry person, but it can even be even worse if it all stays in your head. And so at this level, people are all about black and white, right and wrong. I'm going to win this. You know, you ask somebody who's at level 2 energy, or when we're in our level 2 energy, you ask them something and it's likely going to be resistance or frustration. Then we move up to level 3, which is the first level of that anabolic energy I was mentioning. And so this is the first time, so level 1 and level 2, you're like this. So level 3 is the first time you look, okay, there might actually be something out there bigger than just me. Maybe this person or this situation, maybe there's another side to it, right? And so you start to be able to rationalize and kind of like, okay, you can take responsibility in it. Like, okay, so maybe I did that, but they did this, right? So that a little bit of that level 2 can still be there, but you're able to kind of rationalize it and move ahead a little bit, see the other side. Level 4 we go up to, and that's all about compassion and service to others. So when we can tap into our level 4 energy, or if we have folks who are primary level 4s or in our organizations or in our life, they're the ones they're the carers. They're kind of the relationship knitters, right? They make sure everybody is feeling good. People are taken care of. Just like you were describing earlier, those empathetic conversations that you have. So the competency over an emotional intelligence is really served when you're in your level 4. We move up to level 5, and that's all about opportunity. They're natural problem solvers. They're always looking for what, if something, it doesn't matter if something goes right or wrong, because they can always do more. They can move it forward, right? So they're the ones who are, if you take a problem to a level 5 leader, they're going to find a way to make it even better than it was before, right? And you can imagine how different that would be than taking something to someone who's either a level 2 leader or in a level 2 mood, and you take a problem to them. There's going to be, force, right? Or even a level 1, like, well, I didn't think it was going to work anyways, right? So you can see how our energy really interconnects us to ourselves and others. Then we move up to our level 6. Level 6 is all about visionary and innovation. So this is people who are, you're just doing something, like you could be, even when you're at home and in your home office, Roxanne, and you're making something or crafting something, you're really using that creative energy. That's a real level 6 attribute. And then level 7 is not a level that people live at. You don't have a primary level 7, but you want to tap into that. That's where you're in your flow or you're in your bliss. It's where you are happiest, right? And so we really need to know what makes us happy, what gives us peace and purpose, because when we're in that lower level energy, which we all are, we need to get ourselves out, right? And so as a little trick of the trade, I'll say now, when we're having those moments when we're level 1 or level 2, we want to reset, because energy is contagious. So sometimes if you're in level 1, then you have another level 1 thought, and then you have another level 1 thought, and now they're compounding, right? Or it's the same with level 2, and now you're madder, and it's all going here. So what we want to do is pause and break our own thought cycle. So what I say, try to think of it from level 3. So if you're having those level 1, level 2s, try to think of it from level 3. What could be another perspective? What could be the other side? What's another way to look at it, right? If I was having this conversation with a friend or a loved one or my child, what would I tell them, right? So that you're resetting your own thoughts almost with possibilities of what else it could be. Right. And then it tends to help get us out of our selfness. So that's the index in a nutshell. Very, very quick version of it, but that's it in a nutshell.
So let's talk a little bit about moving from catabolic to anabolic. So
Okay.
I'm going to say that we vacillate, most of us.
Yeah.
We definitely, I would say, sometimes things are tough. We're down at 1 or 2.
Yep.
And that's normal.
Yes.
But I'm going to think that most functional teams probably vacillate up and down from a 3 to, say, a 5.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. 3 to 5, 3 to 6. Yeah.
So let's say I'm a leader, and maybe I'm inheriting a team.
Yep.
And I'm starting. What are some of the things that I should be kind of looking at to almost gauge or get a pulse of my team, and some things that I could do to help them along if I'm finding that they're the lower end to your metric there?
So this is a fabulous question. And And sometimes this is exactly what I'm brought in for. So this is where this is where it's really key to understand that higher levels aren't necessarily always better, right? And that all the levels serve their purpose. So if you're in a period of big change management, little change management, anything, or if you have folks on your team who are at that level 1 and level 2, what you want to do is you want to address it with a level 3 approach, right? Because if you start telling them from level 6 about, no, it's amazing, or even level 5, it's amazing, all these changes in 2 years, 3 years, we're going to be on fire. And they're like, listen, Roxanne, like that doesn't help me right today, right? Today I don't like the change, or today I'm feeling scared about where I'm going to end up, right? So what you want to do then is use the levels to your advantage. Use level 3 energy and say, you know what? Okay, so in level 3, the tagline is, I'm going to win. I'd like you to win too, but I'm going to win. So I being the leader and the change. That is going to happen, right? But how are you then seeing it from their side and having those really empathetic, so bringing over your EI competencies, those interpersonal, those healthy assertiveness, using all of the EI competencies, staying at a level 3 and saying, this is how it is. Tell me about it from your side. How can I help bring you along, right? So you're winning in that the change is going to happen. And so it's the win from an organizational perspective, and the leader, their marching orders, if you will, but they're taking the time to understand that people need to come with them. Once you bring them over, and that could take a bit, right? And then that's when you're going to start getting triggered, because then we switched into the, oh, why can't they just get it? Or, oh, do I have to have this conversation again? Which is so natural. Again, we don't want to deny our own emotions and our triggers, because then they're going to pop up somewhere else. But it's having that consciousness. Okay, I'm now having level 2 thoughts, back to level 3, grounding myself as a leader, or in my own life, I could be in the grocery store having the same conversation with a slow walker in front of me. Why are they walking slowly? Maybe they have a sore foot, right? And have people on the highway cut in front of you. Maybe they're in a bigger rush than I am, right? It happens in a million ways in our lives every day. But how are we seeing it from the other person's perspective? Level 3 becomes that key to making the decision to go in positive forward motion towards anabolic energy. Does that answer what you were asking there?
Absolutely. And I often say that from, my lingo is, I want to get out of my head and get into your head, because if I can understand better what Leslie's fear is, or what,
absolutely,
maybe what your experience with change in the past was maybe less than positive, and you're in fear mode, and I'm trying to understand what are the pebbles that I can pull out of you to help you along.
Absolutely. And so this basically gives a really concrete framework and index. People, when they hear energy or emotional intelligence, tend to be like, ooh, that sounds very fluffy and very new agey. And so, as you heard at the Disrupt HR, I'm here to science the fluff up, right? And say, these are the studies, this is the information and the science, taking the fluff, if you will, from the sidelines to the forefront, because that's what's going to eat you up as an individual, or really eat your organization up in a potentially negative way. So what we want to do is really look at positive ways of with intention, using this information as a concrete framework, right? For ourselves, for our teams, for our organizations, for our lives.
Absolutely. And I think it's something, it's a really emotional intelligence is, if I could say what I see it as, is just being able to connect to myself so I can be aware of others around me and how I interplay with those people around me, regardless of the roles that I'm playing, whether I'm mom or I'm, leader, or I'm colleague, or I'm peer, or
absolutely,
I'm, hockey mom, or whatever, just really bringing that space within my world.
You nailed it. That's exactly, yeah.
And sometimes that's difficult. And I'm and I talk about authentic leadership, but what and there was just a study I read, and I'm not remember where I read it from, that most frontline people are wanting their leaders to be more connected to themselves.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. And that is the first pillar of emotional intelligence is all about self-regard, emotional self-awareness, right? And really being able to, an emotional self-expression. You have to be able to know yourself and be confident and have that self-regard to be able to then withstand all of the stimulus that comes at you in a day, especially as a leader. And that can be a leader of your family, it can be a leader of your life, can be, again, anything, because so much comes at us. Our central nervous systems are not set to withstand the level of stimulus that comes at us in modern day. We're wired for like 100 years ago, right? So we've actually stopped being mindful and knowing ourselves, right? Because we generally don't take pause. We don't necessarily know ourselves because we're not taking the time to pause and be mindful of how things are even affecting us. So doing some emotional intelligence coaching and self-reflection really helps that, because it gives us an opportunity to get to know ourselves, and our inner growth truly drives our outer success.
Absolutely. So what are some of the skills, if leaders are listening and they're thinking, I'm pretty good, I'm pretty mindful. Are there some kind of tips that you could give them, the ones that are listening, to kind of start to maybe apply today?
Yes.
To enhance their EI, or even, like I said, to eventually maybe reach out to you more if they're understanding what we've been talking about. And I know that at any given point, 65% of companies are in flux. So there's always need for that ability to figure out ways to effectively connect. So what are some of the tips that you could maybe give to senior people or leaders listening?
Absolutely. I would say, first of all, to really be understanding the point that your energy is your choice, right? So your emotional energy, what you put out, is completely up to you. So in any given moment, be listening. Our bodies and our minds are always sending us the message on how we're feeling, right? So instead of glazing over it and thinking, it's normal that my shoulders are up around my ears, right? It's not normal. So take a moment, put them down, and think, what is it that made me tense? Right? What is it that makes me angry? What is it that's making me feel powerless? Right? Because those are starting to speak to your triggers, right? And again, know thyself. So once you can know that, then you can start creating skills and competencies around addressing them. Like, okay, so I know when X happens, I react with Y. So I know I'm going to have to see X tomorrow. What can I do to own it? And it could be, I need to then look at it from a level 3. What's the other side? Or I need to understand, why is that a trigger? Right? So really start being very mindful of your emotions. Even take an emotion journal, right? Doesn't matter if you're the president of a corporation or your front line. We all have emotions. That's us, right? We are emotional beings. So start being really mindful. And then how is, as a leader especially, how is that then being communicated to those around me? Because your energy is introducing you before you ever say a word. So you can say, oh no, it's not bothering me. But if your face is like this, everyone in the room knows it's bothering you. Or if you're a leader and you walk into a department in the morning and you're like, everybody around you is being now impacted by that as well. They are going to be responding to that. And if you walk in sort of neutral, or if you walk in happy, people are going to be responding to that. What this doesn't mean is that it all has to be rainbows and butterflies and you have to walk in bopping with a smile on your face, right? Sometimes it just is having that transparency of communications, walking in and saying, this hasn't been the morning of my dreams. I'm just going to go into my office and do some quiet work while I regroup, right? Because then now everyone in your department knows, okay, it's not me. Because instantly, as soon as somebody comes in, we all start telling ourselves that story. What did I do? Could it be me? Right? So as a leader, really understand the impact you have on the culture around you. And something as simple as, oh, it's been a doozy of a morning. I'm just going to go and take some breaths and regroup, right? And then you make everyone able to be themselves in that situation. And then if they have a bad morning, just to say, okay, you know what? I just need 5 minutes.
So transparency, really.
Absolutely.
So that if as the leader walking through the door, and I know I have those mornings sometimes.
Yep, we all do.
And then they look at you as being, oh, well, he or she is really real, and you're being vulnerable enough to show
Yes.
me that you are real.
Yes.
So that when I have those moments, I can always say, can I pause a little bit, to your point? Can I have a 5, and then I come back, and then I pivot, and then I could go back to kind of functioning at the level that I need to.
Absolutely. And really acknowledging that emotions are okay. I used to always say to my staff when I worked, I'm like, we are human first, right? You don't apologize for it, because we're human first. Now, that doesn't mean come in as a level 2 every day and be like, that is something we want to start fleshing out. But the thing is, that person might not even recognize that and realize, much to your point, we don't know what we don't know. So sometimes doing the assessments and really having that deep dive into understanding what the index levels are, as well as what emotional intelligence is, it's really powerful information for people to say, oh, it's such an investment in your teams, in yourself, to get to look at it and to talk it through in a very safe place.
Can I ask a question? This is a bit of a pivot, but with EI and mental health, if you're dealing with people with mental health concerns, what's the approach as the leader to kind of think about in reference to strategy if you recognize that someone's struggling?
So that's a really interesting question. So it would depend on if it was mental health in terms of a diagnosis, in which case that would be a referral on, excuse me. As an ICF coach, we have a code of ethics. And within that, if I'm coaching somebody and I come to understand that the person has a mental health issue, then I have a duty to respond or to refer to a counselor. That doesn't mean they can't also have a coach. I actually work with quite a few people who have counselors, and I'm their coach, because we can work sort of week to week at small incremental goals while the counselor. But if it's a mental wellness, so not a diagnosis, but a mental wellness situation, then I would do the exact same. We would dig into the different subcompetencies, try to find the things that are triggering, find where that's leading. So if they're triggering something, then we would look in the positive forward motion in the fast lane program. Then there's a number of, there's 10 modules. And so within that, we find out, where the energy is on a good day, on a normal day, where we fall under stress. That generally falls to either level 1 or level 2, because some things make us feel powerless and some things hop us up, right? So, and then understanding where our values, when those are triggered, and then what we can do with all of these to move us forward in a really logistical way. So removing the emotion from it, once we've addressed the emotion, then, or the trigger, then having that level 3 real deep dive into what could be other things.
Awesome. So that really helps me understand.
Okay. Good.
So if it's someone that's needing obviously professional help, you triage them accordingly.
Absolutely.
But if it's just I'm vacillating, between anabolic to catabolic, and there's sequences or things that I can do at that point, you're assessing it and figuring out the next step.
Yeah. And that's kind of why I was saying a little bit about like an emotional journal, because sometimes we don't even know that we're going back and forth. Something's triggering us, but we're not paying attention to the patterns, or we're not noticing the patterns. And so we just know, well, every day I get really irritated. Okay, but what's irritating? Well, I don't know. Okay. So describe the situation, right? For me, I know when I'm in level 1 energy, my stomach gets upset. So now, having practiced this for so many years, now when I get like that nervous tummy, I'll pause. And again, that mindfulness I was talking about, I'll pause and be like, okay, what just happened? What was I thinking about? Why do I have the nervous tummy? Right? 5-6 years ago, I would have like, oh, and mowed right through it, not even given it a second. That now I can assess it and say, okay, is that something for me to worry about? Or is it not? If it is, then what can I go and do about it? And if it's not, now I know what it is, and the nervous tummy's gone because I've addressed it. So it's really starting to just honor and pay attention to your thoughts and emotions to make you more effective in your life and in your workplace.
So I like that, an emotional journal.
Yes. Yeah,
I like that. I like
Yeah.
that. That's a strategy that I think could be implemented and could
Absolutely.
use such value.
Yeah.
I've gained so much in such a short period of time, and even though we've been chatting, I know we could spend more time. So, Lesley, any final words? And I'm sure people are thinking, oh, what level am I at, and what can I do?
Yep.
They probably have a lot of questions. So, tell them anything you want to leave behind with us, and where people can reach you so they can connect and figure out what it would take to work with you.
Amazing. Well, as you know, I can talk about this stuff all the time. I really like, if I could get the whole world in positive forward motion, one person, one thought, one emotion at a time, that would be my my most joyous contribution to the world. I can be reached at lesliecalvin.ca. So that's my website. And then also Lesley Calvin coaching at gmail.com. And just to note that I'm one of those unique spellings of the Lesley, which is with an EY. So if you try to search Leslie, you won't find me. But so Lesley. As well, I'm on all the social channels. So LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, as well as my programming around Your Energy, Your Choice. That can be done in workshops, that can be done one-on-one. Emotional intelligence, I do it for intro, emotionally intelligent communication, effective leadership, the emotionally effective leader, as well my proprietary program, which is positive forward motion in the fast lane, is 6 month or 10, it can be 6 months or 1 year, 10 module, awesome program for a complete transformational of emotions and behaviors. Really, it's a deep dive into you to move you forward in your life.
Awesome. Well, I think I'm going to implement the emotional journal.
Oh, I love that. That's great,
Yes,
Roxanne.
I love that. And so, I often say that my tagline is that if you take care of people, you don't have to worry about the ROI, because I call it return on relationship. So if you're implementing some of the things that Lesley has shared with us today, really you're investing in your people, and the bottom line takes care of itself. So that's something that's really got reinforced by speaking with Lesley today. So everyone, if you're ever needing more information on me, I'm Roxanne Durhodge. I'm a mental health and wellness specialist, and you can reach out to me at roxannedurhodge.com. So Lesley, thanks again, and I'm sure we'll see you soon.
Thanks so much, Roxanne.
All right, take care.
Thanks for tuning in to Authentic Living with Roxanne, creating the space for positive, healthy change. Roxanne is a keynote speaker, psychotherapist, and coach. To work with Roxanne, visit roxannedurhodge.com/blueprint. We'll see you next time on Authentic Living with Roxanne.